Hey everybody, hope you're having a great day. I had a question from an athlete, and they're new to me and my philosophy around nutrition. So I just figured I would answer their question in a video just so I could give a little bit more information. So their question was, how do I know how many calories and macronutrients I need as an athlete? Which is kind of like the most, like the best question an athlete could ask, because if from a nutrition standpoint or a coaching standpoint, we want you to have the best fuel on board, to be able to have your workouts be as successful as they can, or to race as well as you can. So we really want you to have every opportunity to be successful in your training and your racing. So if we're undernourishing, if we are underfueling our training sessions, it's just going to set yourself up for, having subpar workouts. You are going to not be able to have as good of a performance on race day. You won't be recovering as well with from a muscle standpoint. So the goal is to always make sure that we are dialing in our calories and our macronutrients depending on where you are in your season. So the number one thing to think about is, where are you in your season? Are you out of season? Are you 3 weeks from Ironman? Are you, tapering down to a marathon? Are you maybe 12 weeks into a 24-week plan for, your big race, whatever that race is? So first you have to think to yourself, what's my goal and where am I in my season? Because if your goal is, let's say you want to lose fat, but you only have 3 weeks to your race, those are not really conducive. Those won't really work together. So we have to think about, what's my goal and where am I in my season, and how can those two go together? Because if you guys are very close to your race and you're trying to cut fuel, cut calories, maybe have lower macros than you need to have or should have, then you're going to be negatively impacting your training and your racing. So number one, think about, what's my goal? Is it fat loss? Is it maintain? Is it build muscle? And then second one's going to be, where am I in my season? And kind of think through, is that goal appropriate for where I am in my season? If you say, well, I've got 6 months till I'm doing my first half Ironman and I want to lose fat, then awesome. That's a great time to focus on fat loss. Or, hey, this year is going to be a total base building year and I am, have no races. And that's a great time to work on fat loss or even muscle gain. Or are you just trying to maintain and fuel your sessions? Like, that's awesome, because if you are trying to just say, hey, I want to be stronger, I want to fuel my workouts, then that's where you want to, that's where you want to focus on when you're in your build and in your peaking and when you're in your taper to race. So if you're building, peaking, tapering, racing, you are not trying to, you're not trying to build muscle and you're not trying to lose fat. You are just trying to maintain and make sure your muscles are fueled to be able to race well. So once you know where you are, is if it's a good idea to focus on whatever your goal is, then okay, now I am in season, or now I'm out of season, now I can focus on whatever my goal is. So once you know that, that's kind of the first step. When you guys, there's a couple different kind of ways you could look at it: fat loss, muscle gain, maintenance. If you're maintaining, you're just trying to focus on fueling for your long distance training and racing, then you want to make sure you're eating enough to fuel both your everyday life and your training. So first thing you can do is, on my website, I have a calculator and it's free for anyone to use. It's really designed for endurance athletes. So if a non-endurance athlete goes to it, they may not really have a category that works for them, or they might not, it might not make sense if I say, are you in your base period or you're in your build period? Like, they might be like, I don't have a period. But so you can go to my website, which is fueledcoaching.com, and then that will have a calculator which you can put in what your goal is, whether it's fat loss, maintenance, or muscle gain, and then where you are in your, in your hours of training. Are you, in a heavy build? Are you injured? Whatever you are, put it in, and it will come up with calories and macronutrients based on what the information you tell it to. So it's your height and your weight and your age, all those things, like those things that are kind of like the constants. You put that in, and you put in your training, and it uses exercise physiology formulas. So they are science based, but it's not an exact science, because it's just a calculator. It's not, it's not 100% foolproof. So you want to make sure that you are just using it as you using it and have, there's that extra kind of thought of saying, like, okay, well, this is what the calculator is saying, but I might be a little bit different even though the calculator said this. Okay, So just don't take it as like 100% foolproof. And then if you guys are trying to lose body fat, you have to be in a caloric deficit. So that's first and foremost. You always have to be consuming less calories than you need, or you will not lose that body fat. So you have to be in a caloric deficit. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be low carb, because as long as you're in a caloric deficit, you're going to be eating less calories than you need, and you can have more carbohydrates than you might think. I have some athletes that I've worked with that are plant-based, they're vegan, and 75% of their diet does come from carbohydrates, and they lose fat just as easily as someone that does a higher protein diet. Now, higher protein diets tend to be more satisfying. They allow you to, have that feeling of it's less hunger, because protein is satiating, and so it kind of gives you that satiety factor. So it can be easier to lose fat by having more protein, because it will help you to feel fuller, and it will help to make sure that you're having enough protein that's going to help you to, build or keep on muscle while we are losing body fat. If you guys are maintaining, you want to have a nice balance between carbs, fat, and proteins. You want to make sure having enough carbohydrates to fuel your daily sessions and enough fat and proteins for everything else your body needs. Now, if you're trying to build muscle, you need to be in a caloric an increase in calories. You want to have more calories than you need. So if you need 2,000 calories, you might be taking in 2,300 calories, because your muscle actually, you need to be in a surplus. You need to be having more calories than your body needs to gain muscle. It's just how the body works. It's just that physiology. So you guys, as you're if you're jumping in, just make sure you guys ask a question. If you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it. But know that if you're trying to gain muscle, you have to be in that surplus. So knowing kind of that goal, knowing where you are in your season, knowing kind of what kind of nutrition plan you should be going with, whether it's caloric deficit, whether it's a surplus, or whether it is just a maintenance mode, that'll help you to determine what the next step is from a caloric standpoint and a macro standpoint. And then from just a nutrition standpoint, like recipes, it really can be, I like to say you want to have a carb, fat, and protein at every meal. There should be a fruit and veggie at every meal. The only caveat to that is if you're right before a workout, you don't need to have like a ton of fiber, a ton of, say, fruits and veggies if they're high fiber right before you go for a run. That can irritate your stomach. Or you don't necessarily need a lot of fat right before you work out, because that can irritate your stomach. But on your normal meals, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or snacks that are not right around your workout, I want you to make sure that your plate is balanced. So carbs, fats, and proteins. And that way you know that you're having that balance, and that you're going to shoot for, it could be 50% of your plate is going to be carbohydrates in the form of, beans, grains, fruits, and veg. And then you're going to have a quarter of that plate with protein, and then a quarter of the plate is going to be at least veggies. Okay. When you are out of season and maybe trying to focus more on fat loss, like that first plate might have been maintenance mode or focusing more on performance. If you're trying to lose body fat, it can be helpful to have more protein. So you might dial back the carbohydrate just a little bit and increase the protein just a little bit. That way you're getting more protein. So remember, you have you're more satisfied with the meals that you're having. And then, of course, having the fruits and the veggies, because you're never going to go truly low carb. This is, again, for endurance athletes. This is not for like your everyday person who's not exercising, not training. This is for athletes. So I'm not a big fan of true low carb keto diets for the athletes that work with me, or that want to follow my nutrition philosophy. So you'll never hear me preach about doing a keto diet or a super low carb diet, but you can manipulate your carbohydrates if you are out of season, or you're not in a really heavy intensity, very high intensity training. You need more carbohydrates. So once you kind of look at your plate, dial in that plate, make sure it looks good, then just you create your recipes based on where you are in your season, what your goal is, how many calories you need, and using the calculator on my website, or you can use just some basic exercise physiology formulas too, like the Mifflin-St. Joubert equation is a good one to use. There's other calculators you can use, but just make sure that you're having enough nutrients, enough calories to fit those goals that you have, and you'll know if are you gaining weight, are you maintaining, are you losing weight. That's kind of an easy way to say, where am I? And then when you're making your recipe choices, you always just want to make sure that you're doing a lot of, whole foods, a lot of fruits and veggies, a lot of the lean proteins that are going to be nourishing. So your food, you want to have your food have a high nutrient density, which means, for every, say, ounce of food you're eating, or for everything that you're putting in your mouth, how nutrient dense is it? How many vitamins and minerals, antioxidants are in each bite of food? If you're putting in food that has low nutrient density, then you're typically going to have just usually it's higher calories, less quality. So it's not going to be as good for you as an athlete. And so I want you to think about nutrient density. So things like, fats, you're going to say like, avocado and nuts are going to be a really great nutrient density kind of healthy fat, whereas something that's just like cooking with like canola oil isn't going to be a nutrient dense fat. Okay, so just think about nutrient density. And then if you guys want even more help, or you're like, oh, but I know what you're saying, but I can't figure out like what kind of recipe should I, what constitutes, nutrient dense recipes, or what would you recommend? Well, I love recipes. I love cooking. It's one of my favorite things. And I did come up with a little program. It's called the Endurance Plate, and it's for athletes that are just looking for really bit more in-depth nutrition, whether it comes to normal nutrition or training nutrition. And I have anywhere from 30 recipes go to the 60 recipes. You can change them based on your season. So you have a huge recipe book. There's a 20-page ebook all about how to know how much to eat. I have a fueling guide, and I have a huge grocery list I made for athletes. So that's also available at my website if you guys are interested in a book that actually kind of details everything. And it's just a super low cost program that you guys can just grab if you're like, that was interesting, but I need more. So you can find that at fueledcoaching.com. It's called the Endurance Plate, or you can just ask me some questions or ask me about it, and I can help you with that. But just know, if you guys are endurance athletes and you are looking for how many calories, how many macronutrients you should be taking in, know that it's highly dependent on the season you're in, the goals you have, how much you're training, and how nutrient dense your food is. So it's kind of a big picture. It's not just a cut and dry answer, but feel free to ask me any questions. I am happy to help, and I am always here for you guys. All right, have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys later. Okay, bye.